Something felt strange about the way Marcus kept looking at his water glass. Not drinking from it, just staring at it like the glass held answers he couldn't say out loud. His fingers kept tapping the side, a nervous rhythm that made my stomach twist. I'm Dorothy Chen, and that Tuesday afternoon changed everything I thought I knew about protecting the people I love. We sat in the corner booth of his favorite restaurant, the one where we always celebrated his big moments. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, painting everything golden. The smell of fresh bread mixed with something else I couldn't name at first. Ori hung between us like smoke. Marcus smiled when the waiter passed by, but it didn't reach his eyes. Something was crushing him from the inside. The restaurant buzzed with lunch conversations, forks clinking against plates, people laughing at nearby tables. But our corner felt separate, like we sat inside a bubble where only bad things could enter. His wife Vanessa texted him 3 times in 5 minutes. I watched his jaw tighten each time his phone lit up. Her parents, Richard and Linda Morrison, had invited themselves to his house for dinner that evening. Marcus mentioned it quietly, like he was apologizing for something he couldn't control. The way he said their names made my chest feel heavy. Then his hand moved under the table. Quick and secret. He grabbed my wrist tight, not gentle like my son usually touched me, but desperate like he was drowning and I was the only thing keeping him above water. His thumb pressed against my palm twice, hard and fast. A shadow fell across our table. I looked up and saw Richard Morrison standing there, though Marcus hadn't told me he was coming. He wore an expensive suit and a smile that didn't match his cold eyes. Thought I'd join you too, Richard said, pulling out a chair without being invited. Marcus went completely still beside me. His breathing changed, became shallow and careful. Linda appeared seconds later. Sitting down like this had been planned all along. They ordered wine without asking what we wanted. The whole energy shifted. What had been a mother and son lunch became something else. Something that felt like a trap. Marcus slipped his phone into my purse while pretending to reach for a napkin. I felt the weight of it settle next to my wallet. His lips barely moved when he whispered 3 words that made my blood run cold. Mom, trust nobody. My heart started beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. I wanted to ask him what was happening, wanted to shake the truth out of him right there. But the way Richard watched us stopped me. He studied Marcus like a hawk watching a mouse, waiting for any wrong movement. How's business, son? Richard asked, but the way he said son felt wrong, like he was claiming ownership of something that wasn't his. Marcus answered in a flat voice, giving short responses that revealed nothing. Linda cut her salad into tiny pieces, but I noticed she never actually ate any of it. She was too busy watching, too busy listening. Vanessa called again. Marcus let it ring. Richard's expression hardened. You should answer that. Family shouldn't ignore family. The word family sounded like a threat. Something buzzed against my leg, soft vibrations coming from inside my purse where Marcus had hidden his phone. Once, twice, 3 times, each pulse making my stomach drop further. He was doing something with my phone. His thumb moving beneath the table in small, quick motions. Sweat beaded on his forehead even though the restaurant wasn't warm. His knee bounced under the table, a habit from childhood that only appeared when he was terrified. Richard stood suddenly and walked toward the restroom, but I saw him pull out his phone in the hallway. He wasn't going to the bathroom. He was making a call, checking on something. Linda set down her fork with a soft click that somehow sounded loud. Marcus has been so generous with us, she said, smiling at me. But her eyes stayed empty. We're like real family now. Real family. The words twisted in the air between us. Marcus's hand found mine again under the table. His palm was ice cold and trembling. Mom! He breathed so quietly I almost missed it. You're the only person I can count on. Everything in me wanted to pull him close, to demand he tell me what danger was circling him. But something in his eyes begged me not to make a scene. Not here. Not now. Please don't get involved in anything that could hurt you. I whispered back, squeezing his fingers. I'm scared for you. He lifted his eyes to meet mine, and I saw tears balanced on the edge of spilling over. Pure fear lived in those eyes. Fear I'd never seen in my boy before. Mom, I think they're planning something terrible. The words hit me like a punch. My mouth went dry. The restaurant sounds faded into a dull roar I couldn't separate into individual voices anymore. Every protective feeling a mother carries exploded inside my chest at once. If you're watching this video right now, please drop a comment telling me where you're from. What happened next still plays in my head like a movie I can't stop watching. Marcus didn't say another word. His lips pressed together like he was physically holding back a flood of truth that would destroy everything if he let it out. Richard returned from the hallway. His face set in hard lines. He'd made his call. Whatever he'd confirmed made him look satisfied and dangerous. Linda gathered her purse with smooth movements. Vanessa sent another text. The phone buzzed in my purse, Marcus's phone, still doing whatever he'd programmed it to do. Then my son pushed back his chair. The scraping sound cut through the restaurant noise like a knife. He stood too quickly, his napkin falling to the floor. I need some air, he announced, his voice cracking on the last word. His whole body was shaking now. He couldn't hide it anymore. Richard's eyes narrowed. Linda's expression flickered, just for a second, showing something calculating underneath. Marcus leaned down and pressed a kiss to my forehead. His lips trembled against my skin. I'll call you tonight, Mom, he whispered. I promise I'll explain everything tonight. He walked away fast, weaving between tables, not looking back. Not stopping when Richard called his name. The door closed behind him with a soft chime. The three of us sat in heavy silence. Something terrible had just been set in motion. I could feel it in my bones. That was the last time I saw my son alive. The moment I got into my car, my hands started shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. Marcus's phone burned hot in my purse like it was on fire. I didn't look at it yet. Couldn't. My heart was beating too fast. My thoughts were spinning too wild. I needed to hear his voice first. Needed him to tell me this was all some misunderstanding. I pressed his name in my contacts before my seatbelt even clicked. Ring, ring, ring. Nothing. His voicemail picked up. His cheerful recorded message from months. I drove home on autopilot, my body moving through motions while my brain screamed that something was horribly wrong. Every red light felt like it lasted forever. Every mile stretched longer than it should. The sun was setting, painting the sky in oranges and purples that felt too beautiful for how ugly everything had become. When I pulled into my driveway, the house looked empty and dark. I didn't turn on any lights. I walked straight to the kitchen table and sat down hard. The chair scraped against the floor. The sound echoed through the empty house. I replayed the lunch in my head, watching it like a film. Marcus's cold hand, his shaking knee, the way he whispered, the fear in his eyes, Richard's sudden appearance, Linda's fake smiles, the buzzing phone, the secret transfer of his phone into my purse. That final whispered promise. I'll explain everything tonight. Why had I gotten annoyed with him? When he said not to get involved, I'd sounded irritated, impatient, like he was bothering me with his problems. The guilt hit me hard and fast, crawling up my throat like something alive. I should have grabbed his hand and refused to let go. Should have demanded answers right there in the restaurant. Should have protected him the way I'd protected him when he was small and scared of thunderstorms. I called his number again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. I pressed the phone against my forehead and let the tears finally come. Hot and angry and full of regret. Time passed in strange jumps. 1 minute it was 7 o'clock. Then somehow it was 9:30. Then midnight. The house stayed dark. Kept calling. My phone battery dropped to 15%. Then 10. Then 5. I plugged it in with shaking hands and watched the screen light up with no new messages. No missed calls. Nothing. The silence in the house felt alive, pressing against my ears until they rang. I couldn't sleep. Couldn't eat. Couldn't do anything except stare at my phone and remember. Remember when Marcus was 7 and had bad dreams almost every night. He'd creep into my room on silent feet, whisper, "Mama, I'm scared." And I'd pull back my covers and let him curl up safe beside me. I'd rub circles on his back and hum old songs until his breathing deepened into sleep. For so many years it was just the two of us. After his father died, we became a team. Marcus and Dorothy against the world. Late-night pizza when money was tight. Him crying on my shoulder when his first business failed. The way his whole face would light up when he wanted to share good news. "Mom, guess what?" he'd shout, bursting through my door. Always wanting my approval first. Always making sure I was proud. But today, when he needed me most, I'd hesitated. I'd worried about getting involved instead of just diving in to save him. My chest ached with the weight of that mistake. The clock on the wall ticked steadily forward. 2 in the morning. 2:30. 3. At 3:45, my mind finally accepted what my heart had been screaming for hours. Marcus wasn't ignoring my calls. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. But I didn't stop calling. Even when my fingers cramped from gripping the phone so tight. Even when my eyes burned from refusing to blink. Even when dawn started creeping through my windows, turning the darkness gray, then pale blue. Kept pressing his name. Kept listening to that cheerful voicemail message. Kept hoping the next call would be different. When my battery died again, I felt like I'd lost my last connection to him. I plugged it back in immediately, watching the black screen with desperate eyes until the charging symbol appeared. The phone came back to life slowly. Still no messages. Still no missed calls. The text I'd sent hours ago. "Baby, please call me. I'm worried sick," sat there with no response underneath it. The world outside my windows was waking up. Birds started their morning songs. Cars drove past on their way to work. The street lights blinked off one by one. Everything was normal out there. But nothing would ever be normal for me again. My phone rang. The sound was so sudden and sharp I nearly dropped it. My hands fumbled, almost sending it flying across the table. I grabbed it with both hands, my heart slamming against my ribs. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Something cold settled in my stomach. I answered, my voice barely working. "Hello." A woman's voice came through, professional and detached. "Is this Dorothy Chen?" "Yes," I whispered. "This is Officer Martinez with the police department. Your son Marcus Chen has been found unresponsive at his residence." The rest of her words dissolved into static. I heard sounds coming from my throat, animal sounds of grief and denial. Unresponsive. The word echoed in my skull. She was still talking, giving me addresses and instructions, but I couldn't focus. "My son. Marcus. My baby." I don't remember getting in the car. I don't remember the drive. One moment I was frozen at my kitchen table, and the next moment I was speeding down streets I'd traveled 1,000 times before, but they all looked different now. Strange and tilted and wrong. When I reached Marcus's street, red and blue lights painted every surface. Police cars lined the road, their lights spinning and flashing. Officers walked with practiced calm, their movements slow and controlled like they'd done this dance many times before. I parked crooked, barely getting the car stopped before I jumped out. My legs felt weak, like they might not hold me. A young officer moved to intercept me. Her hand raised in a stopping gesture. "Ma'am, this is an active scene. You need to stay back here." Kept walking. My body didn't recognize her authority. Didn't care about yellow tape or procedures. Marcus was somewhere in that house, and nothing on earth could stop a mother from reaching her child. "Ma'am, please," she said more firmly, moving to block my path. Her hand touched my shoulder gently. "I'm his mother," I said. My voice came out strange, too high and tight. Those words, "I'm his mother," made her pause. Something in her eyes softened. But before she could respond, Vanessa appeared. Marcus's wife. Her face was wet with tears, but something about them looked wrong. They sat on her cheeks like decorations, Not like the tears of someone whose heart was breaking. She saw me and looked away fast, like shame was a bright light she couldn't face directly. Behind her stood Richard Morrison, one hand resting on Vanessa's shoulder. The other hand was tucked in his pocket, casual and comfortable. Too comfortable for a man at a death scene. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. The officer beside me spoke into her radio, asking for guidance. Richard walked toward us with measured steps. "Dorothy," he said, using my first name like we were friends. "This is too difficult. You should go home and rest. We're handling everything." Handling everything. Like Marcus was a business deal to close. I gripped the side of a police car to keep myself standing. My legs were shaking so badly. Richard came closer, his voice dropping into a softer tone that felt rehearsed. "It was a terrible accident," he said. "A tragic accident. The detectives have already reviewed everything." He gestured back toward the house like he owned it. Like he owned the story. "Please, Dorothy. Go home. Let us manage the difficult parts." Vanessa stood behind him like a puppet, nodding along. Her mother Linda appeared from somewhere, wrapping an arm around her daughter. They looked like a united front. A family protecting each other. The officer cleared her throat and repeated what she'd clearly been told to say. "It appears your son accidentally overdosed on sleeping medication, mixed with alcohol. It's unfortunately more common than people think." Common. They kept using that word. Common tragic accident. The words felt rehearsed. Practiced. Like everyone had agreed on the story beforehand. My mouth opened but nothing came out. My son didn't take sleeping pills. Marcus barely drank alcohol. He was always so careful about what he put in his body. But saying that out loud felt impossible. The grief was crushing my chest, making it hard to breathe. Another officer approached and gently guided me back toward the sidewalk. His touch was kind but firm. His eyes looked past me, not at me. Following a script, not his heart. I forced myself to focus through the tears blurring my vision. To notice. The front door of Marcus's house stood open. Through the doorway I could see paramedics moving slowly, their urgency long gone. Someone rolled a stretcher across the hardwood floor I'd helped Marcus pick out when he bought this house. Then I saw something that made my heart stop. Marcus's laptop sat on the hood of Richard's car. Not inside the house. Not in police custody. On Richard's car, like he'd already claimed it. Like he'd already been inside gathering things. I stared at it, my brain trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Richard noticed where I was looking. He moved quickly, grabbing the laptop and tucking it under his arm. He glanced at Vanessa and said something I couldn't hear. But I read his lips. The words made my blood turn to ice. "At least we got what we needed. Got what they needed." My hands balled into fists. What did they need? What had they taken? The officer beside me tried again. "Ma'am, please. We need you to step back. This scene is secure now." Secure. Active. Accident. Their words piled on top of each other, smooth and prepared. Too prepared. Richard placed both hands on Linda's shoulders, turning her away from me. They moved toward their car in synchronized steps. Vanessa wiped her face, still without swollen eyes or red nose. Just wet cheeks that looked painted on. "He must have been so stressed," she said to no one in particular. Her voice didn't match her expression. Didn't match anything. The detective supervising the scene moved toward the ambulance. A white sheet covered the stretcher they loaded into the back. My son's shape underneath that cloth, the curve of his shoulders, the length of his legs, tore my heart completely in half. My knees started to buckle. I reached for the car beside me, needing something solid to hold onto before I collapsed right there in the street. My purse slipped down my shoulder. My phone fell out, clattering against the pavement. When I bent to pick it up, the screen lit up with a notification. Bank alert. The words swam in my blurry vision. Incoming transfer $50 million. Everything stopped. The world froze around me while I stared at those numbers. $50 million. Transferred into my account. My mind couldn't process it. Couldn't connect the pieces. Marcus's phone hidden in my purse. The buzzing during lunch. His whispered words about trusting only me. The desperate fear in his eyes. He'd sent me his fortune. All of it. Every dollar he'd built through years of hard work and brilliant ideas. He'd given it to me right there in the restaurant while Richard and Linda watched. While Vanessa texted him again and again. He'd known. Somehow Marcus had known what was coming. And he'd protected the one thing they wanted most. He'd protected it by giving it to me. I looked up at the house, at Richard climbing into his car with Marcus's laptop, at Vanessa's fake tears, at Linda's calculating eyes. They thought they'd won. They thought whatever they'd done had given them control of everything Marcus had built. They had no idea the money was already gone. Already safe. Already mine. I slipped my phone back into my purse with shaking hands. My heart was racing, but my mind had suddenly become crystal clear. Sharp. Focused. I couldn't tell anyone about the transfer. Not yet. Not until I understood what had really happened to my son. The officer touched my shoulder gently. "Ma'am, is there someone we can call for you? Someone who can drive you home?" I shook my head. "I can drive," I heard myself say. My voice sounded far away. The officer looked uncertain but nodded. "We'll be in touch," she said. "The medical examiner will contact you about arrangements." I walked back to my car on wooden legs. Got in. Started the engine. My hands moved through the motions while my brain screamed. As I pulled away from the curb, I watched Richard's car in my rearview mirror. He sat in the driver's seat making a phone call. His face animated. Excited. They were celebrating. The house felt different when I walked inside. Empty in a way it had never been empty before. Like all the light had been sucked out through the windows, leaving only shadows. I didn't know what to do with my body. Where to sit. How to breathe. Every mother's worst nightmare had come true, and I was supposed to just keep existing. Keep moving. Keep functioning. I dropped my purse on the kitchen table and stood there, staring at nothing. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "We'll come by tomorrow to discuss Marcus's affairs. We know he would want us to help you through this difficult time." Richard and Linda. Already circling. Already planning their approach. They didn't know I had the money. Didn't know Marcus had outsmarted them in his final hours. I saved the message without responding. My hands found the zipper on my purse without thinking. I pulled out Marcus's phone, the one he'd slipped to me under the restaurant table. The screen was locked. I tried his birthday. It opened immediately, showing me a screen full of apps and messages. My hands shook as I navigated to his banking app. It was still logged in. The transaction history loaded slowly, each second feeling like an hour. And there it was. Transfer to Dorothy Chen, $50 million. Completed at 1:47 p.m. yesterday. While we sat in that restaurant. While Richard and Linda watched. While Vanessa kept texting. While my son's hands shook under the table. He'd moved his entire fortune to me. I scrolled up through his messages, my heart breaking with each one. Texts from Vanessa. "Where are you? Why aren't you answering? My parents need to talk to you tonight. Don't embarrass me." Messages from Richard. "Important family meeting tonight. Be there. We need your signature on documents. Don't make this difficult." Marcus's responses were short. Deflecting. Buying time. The last message he'd sent was to me. Time just before he walked into that restaurant. "Mom, if anything happens to me, don't trust them. Check the storage unit. Number 247. Code is your birthday." My breath caught. Storage unit. My birthday. What had Marcus hidden there? I grabbed my keys with trembling hands. The address for the storage facility was in his contacts. Labeled simply, "Important." It was across town, in a quiet area I'd never been to before. I drove there in a daze, Marcus's phone clutched in my hand. The storage facility was old and industrial, rows of orange metal doors stretching into the distance. Number 247 sat in the back corner. I punched in my birthday with shaking fingers. The lock clicked. The door rolled up with a metallic screech that echoed through the empty aisles. Inside was a single cardboard box, sealed with tape, my name written across the top in Marcus's handwriting. I pulled it out and sat right there on the concrete floor. Didn't bother finding somewhere more comfortable. I needed to open it now. Needed to know what my son thought was important enough to hide. The tape resisted, then gave way. Inside were folders, documents, photos, letters, all organized with the same careful attention Marcus had always given to important things. I lifted the first folder. The tab read, Insurance Policy. My hand shook as I opened it. Pages of insurance documents filled the folder, all of them recent, all of them changed within the last month. Marcus's life insurance had been increased to $10 million. The beneficiary had been changed from me to Vanessa. But there was more. A handwritten note paper-clipped to the front in Marcus's writing. They made me sign this. Kept pushing until I agreed. But I made copies. They don't know I made copies. Mom, if you're reading this, it means they've done something terrible. Please don't let them get away with it. My vision blurred. I set that folder aside and reached for another. This one was labeled Their Plan, in Marcus's shaky handwriting. Inside were printed emails. Texts Marcus had screenshotted. Conversations he'd recorded on his phone. All of them showing Richard and Linda discussing Marcus's worth. Calculating his assets. Making plans. One email made my stomach turn. It was from Richard to an insurance agent. Need to discuss substantial policy increase for family member. Time sensitive. Very time sensitive. The date was 3 weeks ago. Another document showed bank statements. Richard and Linda were drowning in debt. Their business had failed 6 months ago. They owed almost $2 million to various creditors. They were desperate. And they'd seen Marcus as their solution. I kept reading, each page worse than the last. Text messages between Richard and Vanessa planning how to pressure Marcus into signing paperwork. Conversations about his health, about stress, about how accidents happen to successful people all the time. They'd been planning this for weeks, maybe months, planning how to take everything Marcus had built. And when he resisted, when he started pulling away, they'd moved forward with something worse. Something final. The last folder was the heaviest. The tab simply said, Mom. Inside was a letter, multiple pages in Marcus's handwriting. The paper trembled in my hands as I started reading. Dear Mom, if you're reading this, I'm probably gone. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I'm sorry I got involved with these people. I'm sorry I put you in this position. But I need you to know the truth. They've been pressuring me for months to give them control of my assets. First it was loans. Then it was investments. Then it was documents that would make them joint owners of my company. I kept saying no, kept trying to find peaceful ways to refuse. But they wouldn't stop. Yesterday Richard told me they'd arranged an accident for me if I didn't sign everything over. He said it would look natural. That no one would question it. I stopped reading, pressing the letter to my chest. Oh Marcus, my sweet boy. He'd known. He'd known they were going to kill him, and he'd been trying to protect his fortune. Protect me. Save something from their greedy hands. I forced myself to keep reading through the tears streaming down my face. I transferred everything to you because you're the only person I trust. The only person who ever loved me without wanting something in return. I know this is a terrible burden. I know you didn't ask for this. But please, Mom, please don't let them win. Don't let them take what I built. And please make sure people know the truth about what they did. Love you. I've always loved you. You made me the man I became. Thank you for everything. Your son, Marcus. I sat on that cold concrete floor and cried until I had nothing left inside me. Cried for my son who died knowing it was coming. Cried for the years we'd never have. Cried for the grandchildren I'd never meet. cried for the fear he'd lived with in his final days. When I finally stopped, when the tears ran dry and only emptiness remained, I carefully packed everything back into the box, lifted it, carried it to my car. The sun was setting again, painting the sky in beautiful colors that felt wrong for such an ugly day. I drove home with the box on my passenger seat. Evidence. Proof. Marcus's final gift to me. The truth. Back home, I spread everything across my dining room table. Documents, emails, photos, the letter. All of it telling a story of greed and murder and a young man who'd seen it coming but couldn't stop it. My doorbell rang. I knew who it would be before I opened it. Richard and Linda Morrison stood on my porch wearing black clothes and sympathetic expressions. Vanessa waited behind them, her eyes dry now. "Dorothy," Linda said, reaching for my hands. I pulled back before she could touch me. "We came to help," Richard said. "We know this must be overwhelming for you. All the decisions you'll need to make. We want to support you." Support. The word tasted like poison. "Marcus wouldn't want you to face this alone," Vanessa added. Her voice was soft. "We." I looked at them, really looked at them, and saw nothing but greed hiding behind concern. They'd come to find out about the money, to start claiming what they thought belonged to them. "We should discuss Marcus's assets," Richard said, dropping the pretense fast. "Legally, as his wife, Vanessa is entitled to everything." Everything. They wanted everything. Had killed my son for everything. And now they stood on my porch, barely waiting until his body was cold, demanding their prize. I stepped back and started closing the door. "Not tonight," I said. My voice came out stronger than I expected. Richard's foot blocked the door. "Dorothy, let's be reasonable. We need to handle this properly. There are documents we need to file. Accounts we need to access." "Not tonight," I repeated. Linda's sympathetic expression cracked. "You don't understand how these things work. Time matters. We need to secure his assets before they become complicated." Complicated. They meant before I figured out what happened. Before I found the evidence. Too late. I already knew everything. "Get off my porch," I said quietly. Richard's eyes hardened. "You're making a mistake. We're trying to help you." I pushed the door closed despite Richard's foot. He had to move or get hurt. The door clicked shut. I turned the lock. Stood there with my back against the wood while they knocked 3 more times. Then I heard them walk away, their voices low and angry. They'd be back. I knew they'd be back. But now I had time. Time to plan. Time to prepare. Time to figure out how to use what Marcus had given me. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes I saw Marcus's face at that restaurant. Heard his whispered words. Felt his cold, trembling hand. Dawn I started making calls. First to a lawyer, not someone Marcus had used, someone completely separate. Someone the Morrisons wouldn't expect. Mr. Davidson answered on the 3rd ring despite the early hour. I told him I needed help. Told him my son had died suspiciously. Told him I had evidence. He asked me to come to his office immediately. I gathered everything into 2 bags. The box from storage. Copies of the bank transfer. Marcus's phone with all his messages. My own phone with the notification about the $50 million. I drove to Davidson's office building as the city woke up around me. He met me at the door personally. A tall man with gray hair and kind eyes that sharpened when he saw how much I was carrying. We spread everything across his conference table. He read in silence for almost an hour, his expression getting darker with each page. Finally he looked up at me. "Mrs. Chen," he said carefully, "this isn't just a case of family greed. This is conspiracy to commit murder. The words hung between us. Murder. Can we prove it? Yes. My voice didn't shake. The grief had hardened into something else now. Something focused. Something dangerous. Davidson nodded slowly. With this evidence, yes. These emails show premeditation. The insurance changes show motive. The text messages show planning. He kept reading, pulling out specific documents and arranging them in order. Building a timeline. The medical examiner's report isn't complete yet, he said. But when it comes back, we'll compare it against this evidence. If there are any inconsistencies with their accident story, we'll have them. I watched him work, organizing my son's final gift into a weapon. Justice felt close. Real. Possible. Davidson made calls. Brought in a private investigator. Contacted a forensic accountant. By noon his whole team was assembled, each person taking a different piece of the puzzle Marcus had left behind. They worked through lunch and into the afternoon. I sat in his office, drinking coffee that had gone cold hours ago, watching them turn my son's death into a case. Late that afternoon, Davidson called me into his office. The medical examiner just released preliminary findings, he said. His expression was grim. Marcus didn't die from sleeping pills and alcohol. My heart stopped. What? He was drugged with something much stronger. Something that had to be administered by someone else. The dose was massive. Intentional. This wasn't an accident, Mrs. Chen. This was murder. The word echoed in my head. Murder. 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 They killed him, I whispered. Davidson nodded. And we can prove it. The investigator found security footage from Marcus's neighborhood. A car matching Richard Morrison's vehicle was parked outside Marcus's house until almost midnight the night he died. Everything clicked into place. They'd been there. They'd killed him. Staged it to look like an accident. Then called it in and played the grieving family. While my son lay dead, they'd been stealing his laptop and preparing to claim his fortune. Davidson started making more calls. This time to the police. To the district attorney's office. He spoke in low, urgent tones, explaining what we'd found. Using words like evidence and conspiracy and premeditated murder. I sat frozen while he built the case. While he turned Marcus's carefully saved evidence into charges that would destroy the people who'd destroyed him. By evening, Davidson looked at me with something like respect. Mrs. Chen, your son was brilliant. He knew exactly what he was doing. Every document here is damning. Every piece of evidence is documented and dated. He built their prosecution for us. Tears started again, but different ones this time. Pride mixed with grief. My brilliant boy. He'd known he was running out of time and he'd used every moment to make sure they couldn't win. What happens now? Yes. Davidson closed the last folder. Now we go to the police with everything. File formal complaints. Push for immediate investigation. With evidence this strong, they'll move fast. The police came that night. 2 detectives, a man and a woman, both with serious faces and recording devices. They sat in Davidson's office and listened while I told them everything. Showed them everything. They took notes, questions, examined each document carefully. When I finished, the female detective looked at me with something like wonder. Your son knew, she said. He documented everything. This is the most complete evidence package I've ever seen from a victim. Victim. Marcus was a victim. My son was murdered and these documents proved it. The male detective was already on his phone, calling for backup. For warrants. For arrest teams. We're moving tonight, he told Davidson. With evidence this solid, we can't risk them destroying anything else. I didn't go home. Davidson insisted I stay at his office, protected, while the police executed their warrants. We watched from his window as the sun set and the city lights came on. My phone rang. Richard Morrison. I didn't answer. Rang again. Linda Morrison. I ignored it. Vanessa called 3 times in a row. Let them panic. Let them wonder. Let them feel an ounce of the fear Marcus felt. Around 9 o'clock, Davidson's phone rang. He answered, listened, then looked at me with a small, grim smile. "They're in custody," he said. "All three of them. Richard, Linda, and Vanessa Morrison. Arrested for conspiracy to commit murder and first-degree murder." Closed my eyes. Breathed. Felt something release in my chest. Not relief. Not peace. But the beginning of something like justice. The trial took 6 months. 6 months of lawyers and courtrooms and evidence presentations. 6 months of watching Richard, Linda, and Vanessa sit behind a defense table, their expensive lawyers trying to argue away the mountain of proof Marcus had left. But they couldn't. Every document Marcus had saved told part of the story. The emails showed planning. The insurance changes showed motive. The text messages showed coordination. The security footage showed Richard's car at Marcus's house. The medical examiner showed the drugs that killed my son. The forensic accountant showed their desperate debts. Together, it built a picture so clear that even their lawyers looked defeated by the end. I sat through every day of the trial, listened to every witness, watched every piece of evidence get entered into the record. Marcus's letter was read aloud in court. His voice through his words, telling everyone what they'd planned, what they'd done. I watched Vanessa cry on the stand, claiming she loved Marcus, claiming she knew nothing about her parents' plan. But the text messages proved she'd been part of it from the beginning. Helped coordinate, helped pressure, helped plan. Richard tried to claim everything was a misunderstanding. That Marcus had been unstable. That the documents were taken out of context. But the jury didn't believe him. How could they, with Marcus's own words telling them the truth? Linda barely spoke. Just sat with tight lips and hard eyes, angry at being caught more than sorry for what she'd done. The verdict came on a Tuesday afternoon. Guilty. All three of them. Conspiracy to commit murder. First-degree murder. Insurance fraud. The judge's voice was hard when she spoke. "You murdered a brilliant young man for his money. You showed no remorse. No humanity. Only greed." Richard Morrison was sentenced to life without parole. Linda Morrison was sentenced to life without parole. Vanessa Morrison was sentenced to 30 years. I felt nothing watching them led away in handcuffs. No satisfaction. No relief. Just the hollow knowledge that they'd taken my son and no punishment could bring him back. But Marcus had won. In the end, with his careful planning and his trust in me, he'd won. They didn't get his money. They didn't get away with murder. They got exactly what they deserved. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded me with cameras and questions. I didn't answer. Just walked to Davidson's car and let him drive me home. The $50 million sat in my account, untouched. I hadn't spent $1 of it. Hadn't wanted to. It felt like blood money, even though Marcus had given it to me freely. Finally, 6 months after the trial ended, I knew what to do with it. I met with advisors and lawyers and people who understood how to build something lasting. Together we created a foundation. Named it after Marcus. The Marcus Chen Foundation for Young Entrepreneurs. It would give money to young people starting businesses. People with brilliant ideas but no resources. People who reminded me of Marcus when he was 25 and full of dreams. The foundation launched on what would have been Marcus's 32nd birthday. I stood in the office we'd rented, looking at the plaque on the wall with his name and his photo, and finally felt something like peace. Not happiness. Peace would never be the same after losing him. But purpose. His money would help people instead of feeding the greed that killed him. His legacy would be creation, not destruction. Life, not death. The first year we helped 23 young entrepreneurs start businesses. I met each one personally. Listened to their ideas. Saw their excitement. Some of them reminded me so much of Marcus it hurt. But it was a good hurt. A hurt that meant something. The foundation grew. More applications. More success stories. Young people building dreams with Marcus's help, even though they'd never meet him. Even though they didn't know the terrible story behind the money that launched their futures. I kept Marcus's letter framed on my office wall. Read it every morning before starting work. Please don't let them win, he'd written. They didn't win, baby. I promise they didn't win. 3 years after his death, the foundation had helped over 100 entrepreneurs. Created jobs. Built companies. Changed lives. Marcus's $50 million was growing, multiplying, spreading good in ways those greedy people never could have imagined. I never remarried. Never wanted to. My life became the foundation. Helping people. Honoring Marcus. Making sure his death meant something beyond tragedy. Sometimes people asked if I was angry. If I hated the Morrisons for what they'd taken from me. The truth was more complicated. I didn't hate them. Hate required too much energy, too much focus. I'd chosen to pour everything into creation instead of destruction. Into life instead of death. But I never forgot. Never let myself forget what greed could do. What people were capable of when they valued money over human life. The foundation grew beyond what I'd imagined. By the 5th year we had offices in 3 cities. Had helped over 300 young people. Had created thousands of jobs. Marcus's legacy was spreading like light, pushing back the darkness his death had created. On the 6th anniversary of his death, I drove to the cemetery. Brought fresh flowers like I did every week. Sat on the grass beside his headstone. The grass was soft. The day was quiet. Birds sang in the trees overhead. I did it, I told him. I used your gift exactly how you would have wanted. I protected it. I built something good with it. They didn't win, baby. You did. The wind picked up, rustling through the leaves. For just a moment I felt something warm. Something peaceful. Something that felt like Marcus saying he was proud. I stayed until the sun started to set, painting the sky in oranges and purples. Beautiful colors that didn't feel wrong anymore. Just beautiful. As I stood to leave, I placed my hand on his headstone. Cool stone under my palm. His name carved deep. Marcus Chin. Beloved son. Brilliant mind. Forever missed. You saved yourself, I whispered. With that phone. With those documents. With your trust in me. You saved yourself and you saved your legacy. I'm so proud of you. Walking back to my car I didn't cry. The tears had run out years ago. Now there was just love. Deep, endless love for the boy I'd raised. The man he'd become. The hero he'd been in his final hours. The foundation thrived. Every year brought new success stories. Young people who'd been given a chance building incredible things. Some failed. That was expected. But many succeeded beyond imagination. One of our first recipients sold her company for $30 million. She came to me with tears in her eyes and tried to donate it all back to the foundation. I told her to keep half and donate half. That's what Marcus would have wanted. Balance. Generosity with wisdom. The money Marcus gave me that desperate afternoon grew and multiplied. The 50 million became 70 million in investments, then 90, and more. The foundation became self-sustaining. Would exist long after I was gone. Would carry Marcus's name and his spirit forward into a future he'd never see. Richard Morrison died in prison after 8 years. Heart attack. I didn't feel glad. Didn't feel sad. Just felt nothing. Linda Morrison was still serving her sentence. I heard she'd found religion. To speak with me. I declined. Some doors needed to stay closed. Vanessa Morrison was released after serving 22 years. She moved far away. Changed her name. I hoped she'd found peace. Hoped she understood the magnitude of what they'd destroyed. But I didn't need to know. My peace didn't depend on her regret. 10 years after Marcus's death, the foundation celebrated its biggest success. A young woman we'd funded had developed a medical device that would save millions of lives. She stood on stage at our annual gala, holding the award we'd named after Marcus, and thanked him for the chance he'd given her. "I never met Marcus Chen," she said. "But his generosity changed my life. Changed the world." This is what happens when someone believes in dreams instead of destroying them. The room erupted in applause. I sat in the back, tears streaming down my face. Good tears this time. Proud tears. Marcus's death had been senseless and cruel. But his life, his gift, his trust in me had created something beautiful. Something that would outlive all of us. That night, driving home under stars, I felt him with me. Not as a ghost. Not as grief. Just as presence. As love. As the eternal connection between mother and child that death could bruise but never break. "Thank you," I whispered to the darkness. "Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for being brilliant even in your fear. Thank you for the gift of being your mother." The stars seemed to shine brighter. The road seemed clearer. Home felt warm when I arrived. I made tea and sat at my kitchen table. The same table where I'd first realized Marcus was truly gone. But it didn't hurt the same way anymore. The sharp edges had softened into something bearable. Something that shaped me instead of destroying me. I pulled out the letter Marcus had written. Read it for the 1,000th time. His words as familiar as prayers now. "Please don't let them win." They didn't win, Marcus. They lost everything. Their freedom. Their reputation. Their future. And you, even in death, you won. Your money helped hundreds of people. Your story taught thousands about the danger of greed. Your trust in me gave me purpose when grief tried to take everything. I carefully folded the letter and placed it back in its frame. Tomorrow I'd go to the foundation office. Review new applications. Meet with young dreamers. Help build Marcus's legacy one success at a time. Tonight, I'd sleep peacefully for the first time in years. Because I'd kept my promise. I protected what he gave me. I'd used it exactly how he would have wanted. Justice had been served. His killers had been punished. His legacy had been honored. And somewhere, somehow, I believed Marcus knew. Believed he was proud. Believed he was finally at rest. The clock struck midnight. New day. Another day to carry his light forward. Another day to prove that love and trust and goodness could survive even the darkest betrayal. I turned off the lights and climbed the stairs to bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. New opportunities. New chances to make Marcus's death mean something beyond tragedy. But tonight I'd rest. Held safe by the memory of my brilliant, brave son. Protected by the foundation we'd built together. Him with his final gift. Me with my mother's love. They tried to destroy him. Tried to steal everything he'd created. Tried to win through murder and lies. But Marcus had outsmarted them all. With a phone slipped under a table. With documents saved in a storage unit. With $50 million transferred in desperate, shaking moments. With trust placed in the one person who'd loved him since before he took his first breath. I closed my eyes and whispered one final prayer into the darkness. "Sleep well, my son. Your trust was not misplaced. Your legacy lives on. And your mother will protect it until her last breath." Peace settled over me like a blanket. Warm. Complete. Marcus was gone. But everything he'd been, everything he'd built, everything he'd believed in continued. Through me. Through the foundation. Through every young person we helped reach for dreams that seemed impossible. That was his real gift. Not the $50 million. But the reminder that one person's trust can change everything. That even in the darkest moment, hope can survive. That love, real love, never truly dies. Just changes form. Becomes something new. Something eternal. I drifted toward sleep with Marcus's final words echoing in my mind. Thank you for everything. You made me the man I became. No, baby. You made yourself. I just had the blessing of watching it happen. And now I have the honor of making sure the world never forgets. Sleep came easily. Dreams came softly. And in those dreams, Marcus was young again. Smiling. Telling me about his newest idea. Asking if I was proud. Always asking if I was proud. Yes, I told him in the dream. Yes, I'm proud. I've always been proud. And I always will be. The foundation continued to grow. By year 15, we'd helped over 1,000 young entrepreneurs. Created tens of thousands of jobs. Changed entire communities. Marcus's name became synonymous with opportunity and hope. Schools taught about him. Business programs studied the foundation's model. His story, the parts we chose to share publicly, inspired people around the world. But the full truth, the terrible details of his death, I kept private. Protected. Some things belonged only to us. Only to his memory. Only to the justice we'd fought for and won. I grew older. Gray hair. Soft wrinkles. Hands that moved slower than they used to. But the work never stopped. Every morning I woke with purpose. Every night I slept with peace. Marcus had given me both in his final act. The Morrisons faded from public memory. Their names became footnotes in a tragic story. While Marcus's name grew brighter. More meaningful. More eternal. That was the real victory. Not their punishment, but his remembrance. Not their destruction, but his creation. Not revenge, but legacy. On my 70th birthday, the foundation threw a celebration. 500 people attended. Entrepreneurs we'd funded. Employees we'd hired. Lives we'd touched. They stood and applauded when I entered. Thanked me for believing in them. Thanked Marcus for making it possible. I looked around that room full of success and joy and realized something profound. Marcus's death had tried to end his story. But his trust in me had transformed it into something infinite. Something that would outlive all of us. Something that proved love was stronger than greed. Life was stronger than death. Hope was stronger than despair. That night, I visited his grave one more time. The cemetery was quiet. Just me and Marcus under the stars. We did it, I told him. We turned your tragedy into triumph. Your death into life. Your fear into hope. They tried to destroy you. But you're more alive now than ever. I placed fresh flowers on his grave. Kissed my fingers and pressed them to his name carved in stone. Rest easy, my beautiful boy. Your work here is done. The foundation will continue. Your legacy will live forever. And your mother will love you until the universe goes dark. The wind picked up gentle and warm. Like Marcus's hand on my shoulder. Like his voice saying thank you. Like his spirit finally, completely at peace. I walked back to my car under the stars. Tomorrow would bring new applications. New dreams. New chances to carry Marcus's light forward. But tonight, I'd done what I came to do. Said what I needed to say. And Marcus, wherever he was, had heard me. The engine started with a familiar rumble. The road stretched ahead, lit by streetlights and moonlight. I drove home slowly, savoring the quiet. Peace. The completion of a promise kept. Marcus had trusted me with everything. His fortune. His truth. His legacy. And I'd protected it all. Exactly like I'd promised. Exactly like a mother should. The house was warm when I arrived. I made tea and sat in my favorite chair. The same chair where I'd collapsed in grief when the officer called. The same chair where I'd read Marcus's letter for the first time. The same chair where I'd planned the foundation. Full circle. From death to life. From tragedy to triumph. From a mother's worst nightmare to a legacy that would never die. I sipped my tea and smiled. A real smile. The first one in so long I'd forgotten what it felt like. Marcus was gone. But Marcus lived on. In every business we funded. In every dream we supported. In every life we changed. That was his real fortune. Not the $50 million. But the infinite impact of trust placed in the right hands. Of love transformed into action. Of death defeated by purpose. I finished my tea and climbed the stairs to bed. Tomorrow would bring its challenges. Its opportunities. Its chances to keep honoring Marcus. But tonight I'd sleep peacefully. Knowing I'd done everything right. Kept every promise. Protected every gift. And transformed my son's tragic death into a legacy that would outlive us all. The bed was soft. The room was quiet. Sleep came gently. And in my dreams Marcus was waiting. Young. Smiling. I knew you'd do it, Mom, he said. I knew you'd protect everything. I knew you were the only person I could trust. I hugged him tight in the dream. Felt his warmth. Heard his heartbeat. Always, I whispered. I'll always protect you. In life and in death. In memory and in legacy. Forever. He smiled and faded into light. Peaceful. Complete. Gone but never truly gone. Because love doesn't end. Trust doesn't die. And a mother's promise lasts forever. I woke to sunlight streaming through my windows. New day. Another day to carry Marcus forward. Another day to prove that goodness could survive even the darkest betrayal. I dressed slowly. Ate breakfast. Reviewed the Foundation's weekly report. 3 new success stories. 4 new applications. 2 entrepreneurs ready to expand. Marcus's work continued. And so did mine. The phone rang. My assistant. A reporter wanted to interview me about the Foundation's success. About Marcus's legacy. About how we'd helped so many people. I agreed. Marcus's story deserved to be told. Not the tragedy. The triumph. Not the death. The life that came after. I drove to the Foundation office under clear blue skies. The building stood tall and proud. Marcus's name carved in stone above the entrance. Marcus Chen Foundation for Young Entrepreneurs. Inside, staff moved with purpose. Helping people. Changing lives. Honoring a man they'd never met but whose generosity touched everything they did. I settled into my office. Marcus's photo on the wall. His letter beside it. The first dollar we'd given away framed above my desk. Everything that mattered in one room. My assistant brought coffee and the day's schedule. I looked it over and nodded. 3 entrepreneur meetings. 1 board call. 1 interview. All of it meaningful. All of it part of Marcus's legacy. The first meeting started at 9. A young woman with a brilliant idea but no resources. She reminded me of Marcus at 25. Smart. Ambitious. Scared of failing. I listened to her pitch. Saw her potential. Approved her funding on the spot. She cried. Thanked me a dozen times. Promised to make Marcus proud. He already is, I told her. Just by seeing your potential he's proud. Now go build something amazing. She left glowing. Full of hope. Ready to change the world. That was Marcus's real gift. But that day was far away. I still had work to do. Promises to keep. Dreams to fund. Lives to change. Marcus's legacy to protect and grow and ensure lived forever. The night was quiet. Stars filled the sky. I stood at my window and looked up. Somewhere up there Marcus was watching. Proud. Peaceful. Complete. Thank you for trusting me, I whispered to the stars. Thank you for the gift of your love. Thank you for showing me that even in darkness, light can survive. The stars seemed to shine brighter. Like Marcus answering. Like the universe confirming what I already knew. Love wins. Trust matters. Legacy lives forever. I climbed into bed and closed my eyes. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. New opportunities. New ways to honor Marcus. But tonight I'd rest. Safe in the knowledge that I'd kept every promise. Protected every gift. And transformed one mother's worst nightmare into a legacy that would never, ever die. Peace settled over me. Complete. Eternal. Marcus was gone. But Marcus lived on. Me. In the foundation. In every dream we funded. In every life we changed. Forever and always. That was the real victory. Not revenge. Not punishment. But life continuing. Hope surviving. Love winning. Always, always love winning. And as I drifted into sleep, I heard Marcus's voice one final time. Not in my ears. In my heart. Where he'd always lived. Where he'd always stay. I love you, Mom. Thank you for everything. I love you too, baby, I whispered back. Forever and always. Until the stars burn out. Until time itself ends. I love you. And then peace. Perfect, complete, eternal peace. The kind that comes from promises kept. Trust honored. Legacy protected. And love that never, ever dies.